All right, in Chapter 8, we are going to be talking about training and developing employees. And this involves a lot more than just teaching someone how to do their job. Whenever we're talking about training, we're talking about even things as far as, in some extreme cases, reading and writing. Sometimes we're talking about dealing with customers. Sometimes as HR, sometimes we might even have training on avoiding sexual harassment or workplace violence. There's a lot of different things that we can train employees on, and different approaches that we can use to develop new skills or refine skills that they currently have. Even if we were to hire a perfect employee, we're still going to have to train them at some point. Not only on how to do the job with us, but also our culture and our way of doing things. So to go over the learning objectives for this chapter, the first one is summarize the purpose and process of employee orientation. Second, list and briefly explain each of the steps in the training process. Third, explain how to use 5 training techniques. Number 4, list and briefly discuss 4 management development methods. Number 5, list and briefly discuss the importance of the steps in leading organizational change. And finally, explain why a controlled study may be superior for evaluating the training program's effects. So, for the first topic, we are going to summarize the purpose and process of employee orientation. Employee orientation, or in some organizations you may hear it called onboarding, typically happens immediately after the person starts within your company. We've gone through, we've interviewed them, we've hired them, and this may be even day one. Sometimes this even starts before day one that the person has joined your company. And this is one of the most crucial times of your interaction with this employee. You always hear that first impressions are important. Well, first impressions from a company standpoint are just as important, especially whenever you're talking about that you want this person to come to your company, contribute to your goals, and also become a valued member of your company for hopefully for a long period of time. So the first thing that you always want to do is you want to welcome the person to your organization. So this doesn't have to be overly elaborate. You just want to give the person a feeling or a sensation that they are wanted within the organization. If your first interaction with somebody on day one is that you're feeling unwelcome within an organization, you're going to carry that feeling throughout the entire career within that organization, that you don't feel wanted. And it can have great effects later on down the road just because of one interaction with the first person that they see. So after we've welcomed them, gone over some generalities, the first thing that we want to do is give them basic information. This may seem assumed in a lot of cases, but a lot of people want to get everything out of the way right off the bat. You'd be surprised the feeling that you'd get if you walk into a new company. They don't show you where the bathrooms are, they don't show you where the lunchroom is, they don't show you where the common things within the company. You just automatically get the sensation also, going back to that, you don't feel welcome. So you want to give them basic information, sometimes about the office environment, sometimes about the company itself. And this, every company is going to be a little different about what basic information, but you want to get them started right away and start making them feel comfortable. And then next, you want to also get them to start understanding the organization. What is the structure like? Who is your boss? Who are your peers? Who reports to you? How do we do business as a company? That type of thing. Also, what products do you offer? What services do you offer? Just start to get people generally oriented with how things work, what you're going to be doing, and things of that nature. You went over a job description before during the selection process, so they have an idea, but now they are part of your organization, so you can start letting them in, start giving them full bits of information. And also the fourth one, and this is one that is often overlooked the most. As human beings, we're social creatures. We want to feel connection with other people. So if we have the opportunity, we want to start socializing people as soon as they start. This could be start introducing them to people they're going to be working with. This could be at least telling somebody, if you need help with somebody, you can come talk to me, or you could talk to that guy over there. That way it kind of gets the ball rolling as far as that human interaction side. But like I said, a lot of companies forget this part. They forget that our social environment is very important whenever we're in our job, because it is such a large portion of our lives. So a couple things that are important during the orientation process. The first one is the employee handbook. Up until this point, it might have been emailed to them whenever they accepted the job, but you really want to take time to go over some of the important parts of it. Point out, obviously they know their pay and their vacation, but they may not know some of the rules that are specific with the company. They may not know exactly what the different policies are, things like that. Make sure they have a copy of the handbook, and make sure that they accept a copy. A lot of companies will actually make a new employee sign a form saying that they received a copy of the handbook and that certain things were gone over within it. This helps with some of the legal ramifications, that if an employee said, well, I didn't know this policy existed, well, it's in the employee handbook, you signed, said that you got a copy of it. But you want to make sure every employee has a copy. And the next thing we want to consider is orientation technology. And this has really changed a lot within recent years because of the new ways of doing things. Some companies will, as soon as an employee starts, they'll sit them down in front of a computer and have them watch a bunch of videos about the company, about the products that they offer, start getting them up to speed on how they are part of the company. Some of them, like during the selection process, this may be a kiosk, this may be on their own computer. I've even seen so much as digital scavenger hunts, where if you have a large group of people starting at the same time, they use their phones and they find different things within an office building or an office campus or something like that. But it's all unique to the company as far as what technology they want to use to get their people up to speed. Videos on a TV have been being used for decades, but it has advanced so that they may have access to all of the company information on day one, and they can leaf through it as they wish. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. Okay, so just a quick review of the biggest thing is the purpose for onboarding someone into the company. The first one is to make them feel welcome within the company, to give them basic information about who they are within the company and basic information about the company itself, which also goes into understanding the organization, what they stand for, what they offer, what they do, that type of thing. And then also we want to start the process of socializing people with the people that are going to be important in their job. This could just be introducing people. This could be giving someone an email list, anything of that nature. We also touched on the employee handbook, which is important to know that an employee receives it, they review it, and we also go over especially specific topics that we want them to focus on. Also, different orientation technology that can be used, and with every coming year, this is changing a little bit more. And actually, the training process overview is actually going to be within the next couple sections. So, list and briefly explain each of the steps in the training process. The training process is very important to a business for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, we want people to know how to do their job. That's the basics. But we also want to instill a lot of other things whenever we're doing training. This includes health and safety. This includes how we operate as a company. This could be ways to make our business better. There's lots of different things outside. This is how you do your specific job alone. Part of the training process is important because inadequate training can expose the employer to liability for negligent training. Take, for instance, if someone on the job is using a forklift, but they have never actually been trained on how to use a forklift, and they were to hurt somebody or severely damage property or anything of that nature, the company could actually be liable for that because they did not properly train the person before they started using it, the forklift. This goes into a lot of different things. Medical offices have this problem. Any heavy machinery has this problem. We need to make sure that our people have the training they need to operate the tools and do the job that they need to avoid some of it falling back on us. Now, if somebody got hurt while somebody was using a forklift, but they were trained how to do it and they were just ignoring the rules, then it's going to be more on them than it is on us. But if we did not train them and we did so negligently, it much more falls on our back. And training begins right after orientation. Usually, we don't want to have somebody come into the company, get them all set up, squared away, and then have them sit there for a couple weeks before we start training them. That just doesn't make any sense. So typically, I've seen training start as early as the minute orientation is over, or even sometimes during orientation, different training aspects will start popping up. Because we want to get these people up to speed as fast as humanly possible. There's lots of different ways, and we're going to go over a lot of the different ways that we can train people, but there's a lot of different ways that we can try to get them up to speed and get them to a point of efficiency as quickly as we possibly can. And one thing that they note on here is also ask what competencies employees will need. You've oriented somebody, you've told them what the job is, you've explained how the company works. They may already be able to see some of the areas that they're lacking. And they can tell you right out in front, I know I'm going to need help on this. Is there any training on this? This is one of the quickest and easiest ways to make sure that we're using our training time as best as humanly possible. If they say, I don't know this, we might as well take that opportunity to train them on it as quickly as possible before we have to start digging for what competencies they're missing. All right. Elements of the training process. The first thing that we want to do whenever we're considering training somebody is aligning the strategy with what training we're offering. And this goes back to all the way back to the beginning of the class where we talked about how to build a strategy and how do we align what we do with that strategy. Our training should mirror this as well. Take, for instance, if our strategy is to offer the best customer service of any of our competitors, our training should be on customer service. This just shows that we're aligning what we're doing with what we want to be within our industry. If we want to have superior quality products, our training should be on developing quality products. So these should go hand in hand, and we should be able to directly tie the training that we're offering with a strategy that we're trying to achieve. Obviously, we want the person to be able to make our product and do all this other stuff or whatever their job is, but it ultimately should tie directly into what we're trying to achieve as a strategy and as a company as a whole. And whenever we're looking at training, we should also try to link the training with certain performances. We've talked about this a couple times, that we try to make somebody as efficient as possible, make sure they have good quality, make sure that they have certain components about them that we're trying to achieve and try to maximize. Their performance ultimately comes down to how we taught them how to do things. So if we know that we're needing some level of performance in a certain area, we train towards that performance, so that we know that we're training to what we want to achieve. So to go further into training and performance, ensure training translates into improved performance. And this is an ongoing process, not just whenever we're thinking about a new training. Say we develop a training, we start to put it in, 6 months later, we've noticed that there's no improved performance. Did that training do what its job was supposed to do? If not, was it a waste of money and a waste of time for everybody to go through this training? Or might it have been given the wrong way? There's a lot of different things, but we should be able to say, if we offer this training, we should directly be able to tie it to a performance improvement. Obviously, this is very easy to show whenever we're training new people, just because they're going from ground zero to where we want them to be, so anything is an improvement. But if we do this with current employees, we should be able to gauge a certain level of success. Take, for instance, if we were in a factory line and we had training on how to, more quickly attach part A and part B together, and then we put them back into the factory, and a couple months later, if we didn't notice that there's any better performance at putting part A and part B together, was the training worth it? Should we continue with it? Should we change how we did it? But we should be able to say, yes, they can now put part A and part B together much better than they could before. We should also be able to define the training purpose. Ultimately, anytime we're thinking about a training, we should also ultimately be looking at, why should we give this? What reasoning do we have in order to train the people on these things? Is it to make them faster at their job? Is it to satisfy customers? Is it to help them work better as a team? Is it for them to be a better employee? There's lots of different reasons, but we should have a purpose. We don't just throw out a training because it sounds like a good idea and hope we indirectly get some performance enhancement out of it. It just doesn't work that way. We should have company strategies drive the training. Like I said before, we develop training that is directly tied to a strategy, and if the whole company is going in that general direction of the strategy, hopefully we can encourage everybody that's in the training to go in that direction as well. Also, whenever we're giving trainings, check with managers on training success. Like I said right at the beginning of this one, where it says, ensure training translate into improved performance. The people that we are training, this is used in the situation of an HR manager, but as an HR manager, we deliver a training. A couple months down the road, we should go back to the manager of that group and say, did this do anything? Was this helping? Was this useful to your employees, or was this helpful to you? So ultimately, like it says here, how are we doing? Was this training worth it? If they say yes, it improved all performance, great. Now let's open it up to more people. If they said no, it really doesn't work, we didn't see any improvement, then we may need to address some new things. All right, a couple things on here. HR is a profit center. Some of the things that Macy saw in order to improve their training. They went from a 90-minute interactive video where they basically watched a 90-minute video and started attending 3 half-hour trainings to cultivate higher levels of customer service. So they were able to take it. This was probably the exact same information, but instead of sitting for 90 minutes straight, they decided it'd be a better idea to break it into 3 different pieces. This could have been a lot of different reasons, but maybe they noticed that after the first 45 minutes, people stopped paying attention. So if they were dragging it out for another 90 minutes, they were missing half of what they were going over. So all they did was they just broke it down into 3 different sections, and they were able to bump up their sales 3.5%. Does this mean it was because they approached it differently? Maybe they might have used a little different medium, or maybe people just preferred little half-hour sections as opposed to this massive 90-hour commitment. Maybe they were able to pay attention a little better. Okay, the ADDIE 5-step training process. And this is going to look very familiar to a lot of things that we go over just in management in general, and that we've already talked about in this class as well. ADDIE stands for Analyze, Design, Develop, Implement, and Evaluate. The first thing we want to do is analyze where are we right now and what training do we think our employees are going to need. Or maybe what training do we want new employees to receive. The next thing we're going to look at is designing the training program. We put together that, okay, we know they need A, B, and C to do their job better. Now we design how are we going to train A, how are we going to train B, and how are we going to train C. So that we put together an outline of what this system is going to look like. The next one is then we find some way to develop the training. This could be recording videos. This could be making new manuals. This could be anything of actually putting our idea into an actual program. That way we can train people. The 4th step is then to implement our program. This would be deliver the videos or have employees come into our training sessions and actually go over what we want to. And then finally is to evaluate. Like I said, ask the manager, how are we doing? Is this training useful? Do we need to scrap it? Can we continue with it? Was this as useful as we had hoped it would be? So we evaluate how we did with the program and then look back at maybe we need to start back at the beginning again and reanalyze what we're doing. Okay, so one of the things that we need to do is conducting the training needs analysis. We should be able to, like I said, align our training with strategic needs within the company. Sometimes a strategic need is a change within the company that change needs to be trained. Or maybe we're figuring out a different way to go about it. Take, for instance, like I said about we want to be the number 1 customer service in any of our competitors. That's a strategic need. It's going to require a certain amount of training in order to get people to that level that they can start providing that higher level of customer service. Or maybe if we're going to decide we're going to offer a new product line. Obviously, if we're going to start selling something new, we're going to have to train people on something new or something different than we did before. And then also, strategic training needs analysis focus on identifying the training that employees will need to fill new future jobs. Maybe if we're going into the direction of a new product line, maybe we're going to need a new factory that's going to need new management and new supervisors. Or if we're going to try to improve customer service, maybe we're going to need new jobs that specialize in just customer service and not so much in products. So there's a lot of different ways that we analyze what is our strategy and what do we need in order to meet that strategy. All right, performance analysis, current employees' training needs. So this is moving past the new employee area and moving into training our current employees. Performance analysis is the process of verifying that there is a performance deficiency and determining whether the employer should correct such deficiency. So we, throughout the course of doing a job analysis, doing our different assessments over different people and different jobs, we've figured out certain performance standards or benchmarks that we're looking for. Ultimately, what we're looking for, say we want to achieve a certain level, but there's certain employees that are not achieving that level. We need to see why these people are not achieving what we expect them to. Is it because we're expecting too much? Is it because the people need trained in order to get to that level? There's lots of different reasons why people don't perform like we expect them to. And sometimes it comes down to training, sometimes it doesn't. And we need to understand what the differences are. A task analysis can be used to determine the training needs for new employees, and a task analysis record form also used for tracking purposes. Like I said, we know what standards we're looking for, and we can use that to track to see how we get people to get to that level. So we talked about talent management a couple times within the company, and part of that we've talked about already about recruiting, selecting, and we're going to be talking about appraising, but we need to address the whole process. Before we can appraise somebody on a certain level of performance, we have to understand how that performance can be achieved. We can't just appraise somebody and expect them to magically make changes themselves. Sometimes it's in our hands in order to make somebody live up to the potential that we're expecting. And also, moving down to the can't do, won't do. There are certain things that we have to look at within our company. Say we have an employee that is not meeting the performance standards that we set forth. Why are they not meeting this? There are certain things that they can't perform at that level, whether it be because the level is too high, whether it was because they were never trained correctly or they weren't trained enough, or there's a lot of reasons why they legitimately can't get to that standard. And on the flip side of that, there's also certain times when maybe they just don't want to, or they won't get to that point. And that could also be for a whole different environment altogether. Maybe the person doesn't like the job. Maybe the person is disconnected. Some of these things could be helped with training, but oftentimes training alone is not going to fix these problems. So we could make training programs for every tiny little piece of a job, but if they're just not willing to do it, all the training in the world is not going to change that. So that's part of the analysis process, is understanding what can't they do, or what are they not willing to do or not able to do. All right, so moving on to the next section of designing the training program. Step one of designing any training program is obviously setting the learning objectives. And this is the basis for any plan that we have going forward. In order to set a goal within a company, or set a plan, we have to understand what the goal is. Training programs are the exact same way. If we want to understand what we're trying to teach into people, we need to understand what the ultimate outcome is supposed to be. And then after that, we are also looking at creating a motivational learning environment. Different people learn in different environments, but one of the most consistent negative side is if people are not motivated to learn, they're not going to. So you want to create an environment that people want to learn, they want to do better, they want to receive the information you're training. If they're not motivated, it doesn't matter how many different ways you show it to them, they're just never going to learn it. So some of the ways to help train a program to make it meaningful to them, to motivate them to want to learn. The first thing is what's called a bird's eye view, which is just a very high level view of how things are, what the situations are, what they're trying to solve, and things of that nature. Typically, even whenever you start a class, you typically receive a syllabus right at the beginning of class. And those of you that actually read through the whole thing, you'll have noticed that most of the terms and objectives that were talked about, they're very high level and vague. And until you actually go through the class, a lot of times you're not going to fully understand all of them. So you give people a bird's eye view, that way they know what to expect overall. The next one is use familiar examples. Especially for current employees, they're very used to doing things a certain way. They call certain parts certain things, whether it be your own company standard or whether it's an industry standard. If you start using terms that people aren't familiar with, they're just going to shut things out. So by using familiar examples, use the exact same words, the exact same phrases that they use. If they do a process right now and all you're changing is one step in that process, go through the whole process as though they already did it now, and then show them the one thing that they changed. This will help people to put it into perspective and doesn't confuse people by putting a bunch of new things that they aren't familiar with. One of the important things to do is to organize it in a way that makes sense for the people you're delivering it to. In classes like this, we put together chapter by chapter that most of the topics within the chapter are the same type of topic. If you're all over the place, people are going to see that and they're going to shut off. The next one down, familiar terms, that's pretty much the same as familiar examples. If somebody calls a certain tool one name, make sure you call that same tool that same name. That way they're not lost just in understanding what something is. If you're talking to a computer department, it's okay to use computer terms because it's terms they use every day. If you start talking about computer terms to a housekeeping department, you're probably going to get lost somewhere. And then also let them know the perceived needs of why the employee needs to learn this. This is the new direction the company's going, and if you don't learn this, you're not going to be able to do what we need you to do. Or put some urgency on what they're doing. Say, we're going to release this new product line in a month, and you have to learn this stuff before we release that new product line. Stuff like that, so that they have a need to learn this. If it's something that they don't need, they're also not going to see a lot of meaning in paying attention to it or trying to implement it. All right, making skills transfer obvious and easy. One of the first things is similarity. You want to make it very similar from what you're training them to do and what they already do. If they're in a factory, for instance, and they're used to putting parts together, maybe the best training scenario would be in a factory situation. That way, they're very comfortable. They're used to that situation. If you're training somebody how to tear apart a computer and install different parts, maybe if you have the same computers they've always used, that would help adjust to the new training. The next one is to practice new skills and new training. If you tell somebody to do something and then just let them go, more than likely they're going to forget about it before they even get out of the room. Have them practice what you're teaching. Have them practice what they're learning. If you're training something hands-on, have them touch it. Have them do it. This reinforces what they're learning. That way they can grasp it a little bit harder. Label things. It is important to identify certain aspects of the training. Whether this is labeling the beginning of a chapter, that way they know what's going to be in that chapter, or labeling parts in a machine, that way everybody knows that when I say look at part A, everybody knows what part A is. If you just say this part right here and nobody saw where you pointed, it's going to confuse a lot of people, and as soon as they start getting confused, they're going to stop learning. You definitely want to grab somebody's attention. If you don't have somebody's direct attention, they're much less likely that they're actually going to be able to grasp what you're talking about, and then also to use it. Giving somebody heads-up information of things that could happen. Sometimes this could be warnings. Sometimes this could be just attention grabbers. Take, for instance, if you're driving a forklift and you don't look backwards, you could end up running somebody over and hurting them. That's a pretty big heads up for a lot of people, so they're going to start paying attention at that point to safety. And anything that can pull somebody's attention to you is considered a heads up. And then also you have to be very cognizant of what pace you're going at. Different people learn at different paces. If you take somebody that learns slow and try to move them very fast, they're not going to learn. If you talk to somebody that's used to a very fast pace and you go very slow, more than likely they're going to get bored and they're going to stop paying attention. So it's very important to understand who your audience is and at what pace is best for the majority of the people that you're actually training. Different ways to reinforce what we're learning. Like I said, practice is one of them that we talked about on the last slide, that it's a way to reinforce what you're learning. That repetition, that doing it over and over again will help you learn what you're doing. But a couple other things. The first one is reinforce correct responses. This could just be as simple as when somebody says the right answer, you say, "Yep, that's right, good job." Just so the person knows that they were correct. If somebody says an answer, but they don't know if they were correct, are they sure that was the right answer? If they really can't tell, they're not going to be certain. Some different ways we could follow up with a schedule to go over certain things, make sure that they learned what they were doing, and also give them follow-up assignments. We do this in school, where a lot of times you have homework assignments based on something that you've gone over from before. This is a way to follow up, make sure that you learned it, and to revisit it again. Another way is to transfer training. Transfer what you taught them directly into the job. If they learn something that they're not going to need for 6 months, by the time they get around to it, they're already going to forget. If you teach them something that they can start using today, they're going to be much more inclined to start using it today and learn it much quicker. And then as far as other issues, review relevant alternative trainings. There are different ways that we can train people, and we'll go over those as well here in the next couple slides. But it helps to use different methods to approach things depending on who you're talking to, depending on what the topic is, and how they're expecting to receive it. All right, so developing the program itself. Assemble training content and materials. And this is another list that is ultimately growing because we have so many different ways. You could use an iPad, where you give an employee an iPad and have them go through different things. iPads and computers are becoming very interactive, so that if you're showing them how to put different parts together, you could actually develop a program where they can actually drag different parts to where they're supposed to be and make sure that they meet. There's workbooks. A lot of times if you go to an in-person training, they're going to give you a workbook that you go through, you write your answers in, that way you can follow along with people and you're actually physically doing something. Then whenever you're done, you can usually take those with you, so if you have a question, you can look back at it. The next couple are ones that we're actually using right now. The first one is a lecture. This is your traditional teachers standing up in front of a room, or in our case, it's me sitting in front of a microphone, giving a presentation about a topic. Also, I'm using PowerPoint slides for this, and this is also becoming very common that people can see what you're talking about. Topics that are much more visual, you can actually put more pictures in it as well, that way people can see what you're talking about. Web and computer-based activities, also the same as what we're doing right now. I'm delivering this video over the internet, you're watching it on LoudCloud, so we're using different computer material in order to deliver this content. You can do the exact same thing in a workplace. And then we also have trainer resources and manuals. A lot of companies are going to the direction of you have a database of all of the training material that's available. If for whatever reason you want to look up how to do something, there may be a database or a resource available that shows you exactly how to do it, and will train the people how to do it right there. And then we also have different types of support materials, different types of booklets and pamphlets and all kinds of other things that you can use. But like I said, this is constantly changing. You may use a combination of a lot of different ones on here, but ultimately the end product is the same, that you're just using different types of material to approach somebody, that way they can learn your content. All right, so quickly to review, the first one that we went over was the ADDIE method to develop a training program, which includes analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. And then also just to make sure that what we're intending whenever we analyze is the same result we get at the evaluation, or oftentimes we go back to the beginning and start over. And then we also talked about aligning strategic needs with our training needs to make sure that what we're training is something that is in our strategy of our company. We went over program development and how to get a program for the time that we see a deficiency, and see it through to actually being a resource that people can use. We talked about different training equipment, including iPads, computers, workbooks, things of that nature. And then also we went over how to implement these, that way that people actually receive the most information out of them. We're going to skip over this. This is another review slide, but this is all the stuff that we just talked about, ensuring that it's relevant to the person, they can get the most out of it. All right, explain how to use 5 training techniques. One of the most important and most widely used training methods in any company is going to be on-the-job training. And there are lots of different ways that we can address on-the-job training. Basically, what it is whenever you start a job, you start training by doing it. Oftentimes, after you go through orientation, you're not going to then go to a classroom to learn how to do the job, and then eventually you'll start the job sometime later. Oftentimes, you go straight from onboarding orientation directly into starting in the work environment. And there's a lot of different ways to approach this, but basically you learn by doing or learn by watching other people do it. Whenever you're doing on-the-job training, you could be with a wide assortment of people. You could be with your supervisor, watching them and listening to their advice and them showing you how to do it. Sometimes you could be with a peer where they're doing the job that you're ultimately going to be doing as well, so you just do it with them. Depending on the level of technical nature, you may start practicing the same time. They show you something once, you try it and see if it worked. If not, they show you again, and then you try it again. This is a good process because a lot of people learn better by actually just doing it. And so, like I said, there's different ways to go about this. There's some jobs that they just assume that you know what you're doing, so they let you go do it, and then somebody reviews you later to see how you did. But it just depends on the company, depends on what you're doing. There's not going to be a lot of training to move boxes, but at the same time, if you're reviewing the accounting records from a company for the past 10 years, there's going to be some training involved. There's also another type, what's called job rotation, where this is not always for a new employee, but could also be for a current employee as well. Job rotation includes you take somebody that is in a job and intentionally move them to another job so that they can learn that one as well. Some companies have different ways of doing this. Say you're on a factory line and you're in Station A. You stay at Station A for a month, and then you move down to Station B and learn that one now too. After you're there for a month, you move down to Station C, and so on, and then you rotate all the way around till you come back to A. This is a way that a lot of people can see the different aspects of the job, and they can see different things. I know some companies that will only let a certain employee stay within a position for a year or two before he's required to go to another position. That way he can learn different things. This is very common in management, especially if you hire a manager. They want to make sure that that manager knows how to do every job of somebody below them. Say you're a restaurant manager. They'll make you go through a time where you're a server. They'll make you go through a time where you're a cook. They'll make you go through a time where you're the janitor. That way you understand all of those jobs so you know how to lead them. And sometimes they actually have what's called special assignments, where this is give people certain access to information they normally wouldn't have. Take, for instance, if you have a manager within your company that one day you want them to become a director, you would give them certain assignments to open them up to what a director's job actually is. Or maybe you want them to one day become the CEO. You'll give them little special assignments to train them and to show them different ways that or different things the job entails and different ways of approaching it. All right, the on-the-job training process. The first thing we ultimately got to do is prepare in some way. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make is they hire somebody without preparing the training to go with them. So the first day this employee walks in, they said, "Oh, I wasn't expecting you. Go sit with Sally over there and just watch what she does for a couple days." If they weren't ready for it, and then you go over to Sally and she wasn't expecting you, that training process has already started off on a bad foot. You could be walking into the middle of a project, but you never knew how it started, so you're already a little bit behind. So you always want to make sure that you're prepared whenever you have people starting or whenever you start the on-the-job training process. That way you're sure they get the most out of it. One of the first things is always present the operation. Show somebody how to do something first. Even if you want them to do it right after you, always show them first. Don't just, just try this and then I'll show you how to do it afterwards. Always present the operation first. That way they know what they're looking to expect. The next one is find ways to try it out. A lot of companies will look at this as a way, basically a practice run, to make sure that the person can do what they need to, try out the process, and see if they're able to do it. And then also follow up on the tryout to make sure that, yes, this was correct. No, you need to do this a little differently, or we just need to start over again. So we have a couple other types of learning. One of them is assistant or apprenticeship training. This is very common in the trades. You'll hear about an electrician apprentice or a carpenter apprentice. Basically, you work directly underneath somebody. You have a general idea of what you need to do, but you work under somebody that's a master of this already and learn from them, follow them, have them teach you as you go. Usually you get attached with a single person or a small group of people. That way you can learn from them consistently over a period of time. And then there's also informal training that we pick up as we go. This isn't stuff that's written down anywhere. This is as you go through your normal job, you'll talk to people, you'll ask questions, you'll kind of make some stuff up as you go and see if it worked. So there's always going to be a certain level of informal training until you become that master. So a few other types of learning. Job instruction training. Basically, a lot of jobs are very step-by-step, sequence-based jobs. So the job instruction could be just a list of what those steps are. This could be a form, this could be on a computer, this could be a video showing step-by-step how to do something. And this works very well for stuff that is very repetitive and very common. This isn't going to be nearly as helpful for things that are abnormal, things that are changing all the time, because those steps are constantly going to be changing. Another type of learning is lectures, just like going to school. You can do this with small groups of people at work, that if you know something and you want to tell everybody about it, give a lecture on it. A lot of companies use this, especially whenever they're making changes to processes or changing how they do things. Programmed learning is a way, it's basically allowing somebody to learn by going step by step through how to do something. Usually it's assisted with some form of technology or something like that. You might see this, that some classes will go through a computer application, that if you answer a question wrong, you'll take a different path. If you answer a question right, you'll skip on to the next section. If you answer it wrong, they play another video. If you answer it wrong again, they play another video. But as soon as you answer it right, it takes you off completely to someplace else. That's a form of programmed learning. That way they're sure that you're progressing. Behavior modeling is they'll basically let you know the right way of doing things, or the model way of doing things. This is very good for especially like sales training. They'll let you know exactly how former salespeople have done it and the actions that they've taken that have had the most success. That way you can kind of follow their lead and repeat the same pattern and hope to have the same success. Audio-visual based training, sometimes it would help just to watch videos or listen to recordings of things in order to learn. And then what's called vestibule training, which is basically you take a very similar environment, just outside of the line of production. Take, for instance, if you were being trained on how to work on a car, more than likely you're not going to want to work on a customer's car because there's a chance of something going wrong and paying a bunch of money. Maybe they have a test car that you could work on that's outside. It still has all of the same parts, but maybe it just helps you to learn by doing it outside before you actually touch something in real life. Sometimes they'll do this in factories where you have a test environment that even if you mess it up, it's not going to hurt production for the whole factory. And continuing on, electronics performance support systems, where it's basically, this is a level of automated training. Take, for instance, if you say you had a question on how to enroll for health insurance. A lot of times there's a phone number that you can call and you're going to get a computer response talking you step by step on how to enroll for your health insurance, or set up your voicemail on your phone. Some companies do the same process for their training for their employees. Maybe it's a video that if you don't know how to do something, go to our webpage and watch this video and teach you how to do it. There's a lot of different job aids that are like this that can include instructions, they could include videos, they could just show you a diagram of how pieces are supposed to go together. Another one is video conferencing, which is just like it sounds. You can actually sit down with a person and talk to them. Maybe they're giving a lecture in front of a bunch of people, but you're just all video conference together. That way you don't all have to be in the same room. Computer-based training is just like it sounds. You sit down in a computer and learn directly from the computer, whether it be a simulation, whether it be reading something. And then also simulated learning is very similar to vestibule learning, only sometimes you'll use different situations. Sometimes this will be on a computer, sometimes this will be just different approaches. Maybe it might be a game that shows you how to do certain things or puts you through a process. All right, we're going to skip over the improving performance. This is in the book. Other types of learning, lifelong and literacy training techniques. A lot of lifelong learning involves more than just the day-to-day things that you're doing in your job. Sometimes this will be outside of your normal job tasks. Sometimes this will be more higher level. Take, for instance, most teachers are required to go through a certain level of training to continue to develop their skills. This would be a form of lifelong learning just because they're constantly developing new things. Sometimes this is to improve your mental health or to improve your work-life balance. Those would be considered lifelong learning. And then also literacy to go with that. It is not unheard of to go through literacy training in a work environment because we're constantly in a position that we can't eliminate somebody just because they haven't learned something already. So as an employer, we should make it available to people that haven't learned certain things up to this point. We should give them the opportunity to succeed as well. This could be literacy, this could be arithmetic, this could be anything like that for basic skills that we want to encourage. That way people can continue to develop themselves. We have team training, where you as a team learn how to work better together. And this is becoming very popular because you're no longer having people working solo. They're working as teams more than anything else now. Internet-based training, we've gone over that a couple times. Learning management systems. This could be something like LoudCloud is a learning management system that you have a set way of progressing through things. You provide a computer platform to teach people. Virtual classrooms, that's very similar to video conferencing. Just the only difference is that it's more of a classroom environment. A lot of times these are live so that people can actually ask questions and act just like they were in a classroom. And mobile learning, which is ultimately what we're doing right now. You could open this video that I'm recording right now on your phone, on your computer at home. That way it's available at any time, especially for non-mandatory training. Most people aren't going to jump right on that chance to get that non-mandatory training. They're going to do it whenever it's convenient to them. A few options that we have for our own training programs. The first one is prepackaged training solutions. And this is absolutely not going to be for every type of situation. There are certain things that we can just buy out of a box and implement. Not every problem is unique to our company. If you want to talk about things such as theft or sexual harassment or learning to deal with customers or anything like that, it's not unique to our company, so we might be able to find somebody that does that training and just buy it off of them. The next option that we have is outsourced learning, where basically we pay somebody else to come in, develop a program, and come teach it for us. A lot of companies do this, especially if they have very specific focus. If you want to teach a new way of doing accounting, you may hire an accounting firm just to come in and teach us how to do it. Most fields are like that. We could just hire somebody to come in and do it for us. And then the third is ultimately creating your own, where you actually have people that are recording the videos or writing the books or things like that, and then also administering them. But ultimately, all three of these put together, they all start the same. We need to analyze what our training needs are so that we know the best way that we can go about filling those needs. All right, a quick review. On-the-job training is training somebody to do something while they're actually on the job doing it. We also talked about the on-the-job training process and a few other different ways that people learn. One of them is an on-the-job process, but it's apprenticeship, where somebody is partnered up with somebody that's been doing this for years and learning exactly how they do it. They're following in the footsteps, they're shadowing this person, and then helping to guide them to becoming a self-sufficient employee. We have informal training, where we're constantly learning things, even though we're not in a classroom, even though we're not watching a video. Maybe it's just asking a question of the person that's sitting next to you. That way, it's something that you didn't know, now you do. There's nothing formal about that. It's going to happen.